Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. Thousands of pages of Dr. Fauci's emails from the early days of the pandemic are published. We take a closer look at some of them. The Biden administration officially ends the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy. Now immigrants caught crossing the border illegally will be released into the U.S. to await their court dates. An energy expert predicts that Pennsylvania households might have to spend $1,000 more on energy per year if their state joins the Rggi climate compact. State lawmakers are currently blocking the governor from joining. Two parents are locked in a battle over the gender of their 9-year-old son. The mother wants to give him an irreversible hormone treatment, but the father says he'll do whatever is necessary to protect his child. And the world's two strongest economies are eyeing nuclear deterrence aimed at each other. China plans to produce 1,300 nuclear weapons by 2030, while the U.S. seeks to inject more than $20 billion in its nuclear sector. Thousands of emails sent to key coronavirus task force member Dr. Anthony Fauci are revealed. This as calls grow to probe the origins of the virus. NTD's Christina Kim has that story.
Thousands of pages of Dr. Fauci's emails obtained by BuzzFeed News and The Washington Post were published through the Freedom of Information Act, shedding light onto the early days of the pandemic. Notably, Fauci said in several emails that he was not being muzzled or censored by the Trump administration. That's contrary to some concerns and reports, which feared the health official was unable to speak the truth under former President Trump. Fauci denied this. We can also see that Fauci was receiving reports about China's potential cover-up as early as mid-March 2020. One email from a physicist voices concerns that China was misleading the world about the severity of the virus and their death toll numbers. The National Institutes of Health, or NIH, funded a $600,000 grant to EcoHealth Alliance. That group then paid the Wuhan Institute of Virology to study if bat coronaviruses were even capable of transmitting infection to humans. Fauci said the grant didn't fund gain-of-function research, which refers to experiments that aim to increase the transmissibility of pathogens.
The NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
In an email to the NIAID Principal Deputy Director, Fauci requested an urgent call about a paper describing gain-of-function research into coronaviruses. In another email from January 2020, virologist Christian Anderson brought up a possibility that a small part of the virus genome potentially looks engineered. Anderson and his colleagues found the genome inconsistent with expectations from evolutionary theory, but added that they would need to look more closely into this issue. This batch of emails comes as many news outlets are walking back earlier claims that the lab leak idea was a conspiracy theory. Some reporters and outlets said they disregarded the theory because Republicans and Trump brought it up. Now, officials are saying they're not ruling out the possibility that the virus escaped from a lab in Wuhan, and they launched an investigation into the origins. Christina Kim, NTD News.
The Biden administration has officially ended the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy. This means that any illegal immigrant who claims they are seeking asylum, even if they were caught trying to enter the U.S. illegally, will be released into the U.S. while they await their court dates. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more details on this policy change.
Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas on Tuesday ordered employees to no longer enforce the Migrant Protection Protocols, or MPP, also known as the Remain in Mexico policy.
By doing away with this, it is open range, and it will continue to be a one-way conveyor belt of people from Central America primarily into the United States who have no basis under the law to be here.
After taking office, President Biden temporarily suspended the Remain in Mexico policy so they could review its effectiveness. After 3 months of reviewing it, Mayorkas now asserts it wasn't effective for the following reasons. It does not enhance border management enough to justify the effort it took to implement the program. It imposed additional responsibilities that detracted the department's critically important missions. And he was concerned that asylum seekers weren't given an adequate opportunity to appear in court, and that they may have faced unsafe living conditions in Mexico while awaiting their court dates. But Mayorkas didn't mention that the vast majority of asylum seekers don't actually qualify for asylum. Many of them just apply for asylum to get into the U.S. for economic prosperity.
Because only 17% of cases are actually approved by immigration judges, then they're a no-show. They stick around long enough and then they disappear. And it's far more problematic from the United States from a national sovereignty standpoint, as well as an economic standpoint for American workers.
And the number of those who disappear into the U.S. could increase because the DHS is replacing the MPP with a dedicated docket system, meaning that once the immigrant gets into the U.S., even illegally, they won't be sent back to Mexico or detained, but instead released into the states and placed on a list being asked to check in until their court date.
If you put it into the hands of the alien who's already in violation of our immigration laws to be forward about where they are and what their intentions are, it's just not being genuine to the American people, because it is far easier to abscond when you're not detained.
Now, less illegal immigrants will be detained and instead placed on this dedicated docket as the administration works to permanently phase out the Remain in Mexico policy. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
After the ransomware attack just a few days ago, major meat processor JBS says it's making significant progress in resolving the problem. NTD's Colin Frederickson has more.
Employees of the biggest meat processing firm on earth, JBS, returned to work Wednesday. It's just a day after the company's beef operations stopped following a ransomware attack.
The proper way to come back up online is to use different types of equipment, different hardware that wasn't involved in the attack. And because things are happening so quickly, I'm skeptical that that's actually happening.
JBS is the second big company that's recently suffered a ransomware attack, following Colonial Pipeline in May. Experts say this is because such companies have the money to pay and need to resolve the problem quickly because they're vital to the economy. An anonymous source tells CNBC the hacker group REvil is behind the attack.
And they typically use the dark web blog called Happy Blog to name and shame its victims. They have yet to release a blog related to JBS. Anything that's a telltale sign that JBS is negotiating, if not have already paid the ransom.
Cybersecurity ratings firm BitSight says about 70% of the food production industry is at an elevated risk of attack relative to the market because of cybersecurity performance.
In fact, about 40% of those in that elevated risk category are at risk because they just aren't keeping their systems up to date. And that's historically what ransomware will exploit.
JBS USA's CEO says we have cybersecurity plans in place to address these types of issues, and we are successfully executing those plans. He thanks the White House and the FBI for their help. Colin Frederickson, NTD News.
President Biden met at the White House with a Republican senator from West Virginia today to discuss a possible deal on infrastructure. NTD's Steve Lance has more from the White House.
The Senate is evenly divided, so Biden is facing challenges putting together an infrastructure deal that will pass.
I hear all the folks on TV saying, why doesn't Biden get this done? Well, because Biden only has a majority of effectively 4 votes in the House and a tie in the Senate, with 2 members of the Senate who vote more with my Republican friends.
Biden's press secretary Jen Psaki was asked today if the president's comments were criticizing the 2 Democratic senators.
He considers them both friends. He considers them both good working partners. And he also believes that in democracy, we don't have to see eye to eye on every detail of every single issue in order to work together.
The sticking point for Democrat Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema is the corporate tax hike that would be needed to pay for the bill. This puts them more in line with their Republican colleagues. There are a handful of Republican senators eager to make a deal, but Senator Capito was the only one chosen to meet with the president privately. Some say that this is a signature move that the president uses in order to build trust with the hope of pushing the bill forward.
I would expect at least a portion of it to be one-on-one, if not the whole meeting, but I can check on that for you too.
So far, details of the meeting have been slow to emerge. Shortly after the meeting, President Biden departed the White House for his vacation home in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. He did not respond to reporters' questions. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
25 states announced that they would end federal pandemic unemployment benefits soon. These governors are concerned that jobless benefits are keeping millions of American workers from getting back to work.
Maryland Governor Larry Hogan said late Tuesday that he will end enhanced unemployment benefits on July 3rd. Under the current program, jobless workers get an extra $300 per week. The program will last until September 6th. Since March 2020, the state of Maryland has paid out more than $12.3 billion in unemployment benefits to over 730,000 residents. Governor Hogan said in a statement, after 12 consecutive months of job growth, we look forward to getting more Marylanders back to work. He said Maryland has a critical problem. Businesses across the state are trying to hire more people, but many are facing severe worker shortages. As of now, 22 states will end the benefits in June, and another 3 states will follow in July. Idaho Governor Brad Little said some workers are receiving more money on unemployment benefits than they would while working. He said in a statement, "My decision is based on a fundamental conservative principle. We do not want people on unemployment. We want people working." According to recent data from the U.S. Department of Labor, there are a record 8.1 million job openings nationwide.
Pennsylvania lawmakers are trying to prevent the governor from joining a multi-state climate agreement without legislative approval. NTD speaks with an energy expert on what the agreement could do to Pennsylvania's economy. NTD's Allison Lee has the story.
An energy environment.
Energy specialist David Stevenson from the Caesar Rodney Institute tells NTD joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or Rggi, will have devastating economic impacts on Pennsylvania. His analysis says over the next decade, the loss in energy exports may cost Pennsylvania $500 million a year, and the loss in manufacturing jobs may cost the state $1.5 billion a year, among other potential losses.
When you look at all of that, we're looking at probably a $5.5 billion loss to the economy, potentially annually.
Stevenson explains, in a worst-case scenario, this could mean a $1,150 increase in energy costs for average Pennsylvania households. Rggi is an interstate program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Electric power plants in participating states have to buy emission allowances for each ton of CO2 emissions they produce. Stevenson says the 11 existing Rggi states rely on Pennsylvania for energy imports. Pennsylvania will be the only major energy producer if it joins Rggi.
Now they're importing 17% of their electricity, and a lot of that comes from Pennsylvania. So if Pennsylvania suddenly stops exporting electricity to meet this Rggi, I don't know what the Rggi states are going to do for power, because they don't make enough.
Stevenson's studies show that Rggi did not reduce CO2 emissions more effectively than non-Rggi states with similar energy policies. But Rggi states did see their energy costs grow faster than non-Rggi states. He goes on to say that Pennsylvania is already doing a good job in terms of reducing emissions. That's because it's switching from coal to a cleaner alternative, natural gas.
That switch from coal to natural gas, driven by natural gas, has helped the United States in its whole drop about 14% in carbon dioxide emissions. And that's one of the best results in the entire world. There are very few countries that have done that well. And we've got to thank Pennsylvania for that.
Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf is pressing his state to join the program, but state lawmakers are currently trying to block his effort with a new bill. They say there first needs to be a legislative approval, and the governor cannot single-handedly decide on it. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Today, Democratic House Representative Josh Gottheimer led a bipartisan group of lawmakers in urging the Biden administration to support Israel. The lawmakers say they're deeply committed to Israel's security and asked that the administration report to Congress on Israel's needs as soon as possible. The 47 lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, say they want to make sure Israel can defend itself against any attacks. They applauded the Biden administration for replenishing Israel's stock of interceptors for its Iron Dome missile defense system and said the U.S. must ensure that the Iron Dome can continue to protect Israel. And Iran's largest Navy ship sank on Wednesday after catching fire in the Gulf of Oman. The crew are all safe. Let's hear more.
Iran's biggest Navy warship sank on Wednesday. The country's highest tonnage Navy vessel, known as the Karg, caught fire in the Gulf of Oman near the port of Jask, where it was on a training mission. All of its crew members disembarked safely following rescue operations that went on for hours. But efforts to save the ship itself were unsuccessful and it sank, according to Fars news agency. No further explanation has been given for the latest incident in the region of sensitive waterways, though there have been accusations of attacks on ships owned by arch-enemies Iran and Israel there in the past. Iran has refused to recognize Israel since the Islamic Revolution in 1979 that toppled the US-backed Shah. And Israel sees Iran's nuclear program as a threat to its existence. Both parties have claimed they were targeted by the other in the last few months.
A Pentagon audit cleared 2 DJI drones for U.S. government use. DJI is China's largest manufacturer. National security concerns about DJI drones have lingered since 2017. NTD's Lin Lin has the details.
The Pentagon cleared the use of 2 drone models made by China's DJI. The Hill first reported the audit found the drones have no malicious code or intent and are recommended for use by government entities and forces working with U.S. services. The Interior Department temporarily grounded more than 500 DJI drones in January 2020 over cybersecurity concerns. The Justice Department also banned purchasing drones from foreign companies last year. DJI is currently on the Entity List, which restricts technology transfer from the U.S. to the Chinese company. The Bureau of Industry and Security added DJI to the list for its role in enabling wide-scale human rights abuses within China through abusive genetic collection and analysis or high-technology surveillance. The Biden administration is currently reviewing the list. The Pentagon report is significant to DJI's recent reputation management efforts, but Congress is considering a 5-year ban on government purchases of drones made in China. The proposed ban was built into the Endless Frontier Act, which was nearing passage in the Senate last Friday. Lin Lin, NTD News.
The Illinois Senate rejects a House bill that would have made gun owners submit their fingerprints. Instead, they passed a bill that streamlines the state's gun permitting process.
The Illinois Senate says no to mandatory fingerprints for gun owners. Instead, they passed a compromise gun bill that increases some background checks and addresses the state's backlogged gun permitting process. Republican Illinois State Senator Neil Anderson says the state already has some of the most burdensome gun laws in the country. The demand for guns in the state is spiking as crime grows worse. The state's gun permitting system doesn't have the resources to keep up with the demand, and it's growing further and further behind. The bill passed by the Illinois legislature allows gun owners to renew permits automatically if they submit fingerprints. It also consolidates the permit and concealed carry process and establishes a portal for law enforcement to see suspended and revoked permits. Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly supports the bill, but some Republican legislators voted against the bill because it introduces additional background check requirements. State Senator Jason Barrickman says they should be focused on taking guns away from criminals instead of making it harder for law-abiding citizens to exercise Second Amendment rights.
One man says he spent over half a decade fighting with the mother of his children over their son, James. James's mother is trying to transition him to being a girl and plans to start James on puberty blockers. He recently turned 9. NTD's Sapphire Corder has the story.
When Jeff Younger first heard the mother of his children treating his then 3-year-old son James like a girl, he was surprised, never having thought he was anything but a boy. The mother has repeatedly taken Younger to court because she claims she has the right to help James transition physically to a girl.
I think we should just simply wait until the boy grows up and see what he wants to do. And I don't think we should take any irreversible actions. Puberty blockers are not reversible.
James's mother began thinking her son might be a girl when he was 2 years old.
Well, the court testimony that we have is that she began thinking this when he selected a girl's toy for a McDonald's Happy Meal. And then he liked a sparkly silver purse in Target. And at that point, she started thinking he might actually be a girl.
He says his son only acts like a girl around his mother, acting like a normal boy around everyone else. He says he sees James enjoying high-contact sports like boxing and flag football. Despite a court order saying that James is legally a boy, his school treats him like a girl, calling him female pronouns, and even had him change into a dress.
It's literally like watching your child be slowly tortured to death, knowing that he's headed toward physical castration. And the courts are inexorably letting it happen, step by step by step, and refusing to stop it. The schools won't stop it. The cowardly psychologists won't stop it.
Younger's not the only one concerned. Kevin Witt lived as a woman for over 20 years. Witt ended up on the streets and became a prostitute. He later discovered the Bible and became a Christian. And now he calls being transgender a sin.
Then I just started praying and I said, God, if you're as powerful as you say you are, then you're the only one that has the power to take away these desires from my heart. And then over time, slowly but surely, my heart started to change.
He gave up his lifestyle and is now a full-time political activist. He says mostly he wants to protect children. Witt is against medical reassignment for children because he says they don't have enough information to make that decision.
I have lived the life, the trans lifestyle, and this lifestyle is no place for a child. It's just not. And if you want to be trans, that is fine, but wait until you're 18 years old to do it, because you have no idea. Your brain is not even finished developing until you're 25.
As for Younger, with another court date on the horizon, he says he'll do whatever it takes to protect his son from genital mutilation. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
Artists and health experts in Los Angeles are partnering in an initiative called We Rise. It aims to create art in public spaces and engage communities in conversations about mental health. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
Artists Noah Reich and David Maldonado of Classroom of Compassion wanted to connect with the Los Angeles community, especially those in grief. They asked people to submit photos and stories of loved ones they lost during the pandemic. The result? An altar with flowers and candles that serve as a decoration for a screen displaying photos of victims of the virus.
So often through this pandemic, we've either been denied, delayed, or derailed from mourning our loved ones in the way that they deserve. And so we wanted to create a piece that could hold our loved ones as a collective community.
Mental health experts say they're increasingly concerned about the impact of the pandemic.
In addition, the economic and other parallel issues have produced a ton of stress. So mental health challenges, frankly, are through the roof.
A couple of miles from downtown LA, the exterior walls of an art gallery also tell painful stories. For the curator of the mural, these art spaces are instrumental for helping people to heal from their losses as the city reopens.
As the city reopens up, having an opportunity for artists to provide little moments in which people can see themselves, see their own experiences reflected, and know that it's not just something that they're experiencing alone.
For Garcia, this is now a time when healing can begin for everyone. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
You may remember hearing throughout the pandemic, many people have been moving. That demand has hit an already stretched trucking industry hard, and it's bringing the severe driver shortage home for lots of Americans. Jessica Yurkovich has that story.
I've been doing it for over 15 years and driving trucks over 16 years.
Julian Martinez is a veteran truck driver, but in this last year working for Roadway Moving, he's logged more miles and hours on the road than ever before.
I go on a trip, and then when I come back, usually we take 2 or 3 days off, or maybe 5 in the winter, but this time we couldn't because it was so busy.
The trucking industry has been short drivers for years. In 2019, it was shy 61,000 drivers to meet demand, and the pandemic made it worse, leaving drivers like Martinez to pick up the slack.
How much pressure does that put on you?
It do put a lot of pressure because, you know, sometimes you want to get some extra rest. But, you know, we understand what's going on, so we have to fill in.
In the U.S. economy, 73% of goods is moved by truck. Everything Americans eat, buy, grow, and now even COVID-19 vaccines. The pandemic sparked high demand while closing up driving schools. That, plus stricter drug testing requirements, put pressure on a workforce already stretched thin.
That part keeps me up at night. It's a compounding effect. If you throw too many of those things on at one time, there's a break point.
In these boxes is like separate customers, right? Each one represents a customer.
Customers waiting for their belongings to be driven cross-country.
It could be to Florida, it could be to Tennessee, as you've seen over here. It could be to California.
About 12.7 million Americans moved during the height of the pandemic, according to Pew Research. Roadway Moving says it averaged 20,000 inquiries in just the past 2 months.
What percentage do you have to turn down of those 20,000 calls?
Most of it.
Most of it?
Most of it. I would say 80% of it.
Ross Sapir has tried everything to attract drivers, increasing wages by 25% and offering $10,000 in signing bonuses. He's even turned to trains to move people's belongings cross-country.
I think the issue is a lot more serious than people believe it is. I just got a message from the Railyard they don't have drivers. So I don't know about that solution for the summer.
Demand means rising prices. A move costs 15% more at Roadway. And in the grocery store, produce is up 30% at Morton Williams.
Everything gets here by truck, so that affects the price. It cost us $10 to get it here from California without paying for the merchandise.
In an economy where time is money, shortages only increase pressure to deliver.
Do you feel like with the increased demand, the lack of drivers, are you still able to make your trips on time?
Yes, we are. Some customers are a couple of days behind, but we still make it.
Today is Global Running Day. People from over 130 countries are celebrating by running, walking, or making a commitment to run or walk regularly. NTD's Jason Perry has that story.
Global Running Day is celebrated each year on the first Wednesday in June, but it hasn't always been celebrated internationally. The holiday first began in the United States in 2009, and it was originally named National Running Day. But in 2016, it took on the name of Global Running Day. On that day, over 2.5 million people from 177 countries pledged to run over 9 million miles. But since the pandemic, the running events have been held virtually, and only about 5,000 people have pledged to run so far. Runners are encouraged to take photos and videos of themselves running or walking and post them to social media with the hashtag Global Running Day. According to globalrunningday.org, many people are turning to running as a solution to help release anxiety, gain perspective, cope with cabin fever, and keep up well-being. If you're thinking of joining the festivities, please be sure to stay safe and stay hydrated. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Coming up, a sheriff's body cam footage is released. Officials give details about what happened at the Railyard shooting last week in Northern California. A viral video shows a teenager shoving a bear off her property in California. She saw the bear swinging at her dogs and wanted to protect them. That and more on NTD News.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her. All sort of handmade things. The artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. Birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
San Jose police give an update on the deadly shooting that happened Monday night. The shooting involved undercover police detectives and an armed robbery suspect. The police chief also released home security video that shows the circumstances that led to the deadly encounter.
Footage shows 31-year-old Demetrius Stanley holding a handgun. Stanley approached an unmarked vehicle. As the driver's side door opens, he pointed the gun at the driver. The driver was a plainclothes detective who was both conducting an investigation and had an arrest warrant for Stanley. Fearing for his life, the undercover officer opened fire and killed Stanley.
This is a traumatic incident for the family of Demetrius Stanley, for all the involved officers, and for our community. Our officers did not want or anticipate a confrontation that night and did everything possible to avoid having one.
Earlier in March of this year, Stanley was arrested for armed robbery, but he was released on bail the same day. Police later obtained more evidence of Stanley owning illegal weapons. Stanley's residence was under surveillance on the night when the fatal confrontation happened. Dozens of people held a protest against the officer-involved shooting and marched to the San Jose Police Headquarters Monday evening. Police authorities say that racism is not involved in the incident. They cited Stanley being armed with an illegal weapon, posing an imminent life-threatening danger for the officer.
The handgun recovered at the scene on the night of the shooting was a 9mm, unregistered, non-serialized ghost gun with an illegal high-capacity extended magazine. The handgun was loaded with one round in the chamber and multiple rounds in the magazine.
Currently, there's an ongoing joint investigation by the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office and San Jose Homicide Unit to determine if the officer-involved shooting was lawful and justified.
In light of last week's shooting at the VTA Railyard in Silicon Valley, a county sheriff's body cam footage has been released. Officials gave details about the footage on Tuesday, and just a warning, some of the footage is graphic and may be disturbing. NTD's David Lamb has the details.
3, 5, 6, maybe. Let me see your hands.
Santa Clara County Sheriff Lori Smith said her office released the footage to highlight what the officers really face.
What we'll be showing today is the first contact team, and a contact team is one of the first teams that goes into where there's an active shooter.
The 4.5-minute footage shows sheriff's deputies entering the suspected building. The contact team searches and clears the rooms.
Every day, men and women in this county go out and face the unknown, are brave, and they put their lives on the line every day.
Authorities say the suspect was armed with 3 semi-automatic handguns. He opened fire after a morning union meeting at the commuter rail facility located in the heart of Silicon Valley. In the clip, gunshots are heard off camera.
The contact team continues past uncleared areas and moves towards that person. At 6:44:51, the contact team observes a gun in the injured person's hand. The contact team has to ensure that the person down is still not a continued threat to them.
The sheriff says the suspect shot himself twice as police were closing in. He later died of the self-inflicted wounds. Meanwhile, the VTA announced that starting on June 1st, all of the 6 light rails lines and substitute bus services in the Silicon Valley would remain suspended indefinitely. Normal bus routes remain in service. The agency is giving time to employees to recover and support each other. There is no estimate when service will resume. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
The fire chief of the Los Angeles County Fire Department delivered tragic news on Tuesday. He said an off-duty firefighter shot 2 of his colleagues, killing one at their fire station.
According to Fire Chief Daryl Osby, authorities received reports about the shooting around 11 a.m. Tuesday. It was at Fire Station 81 in Agua Dulce, which is roughly 30 miles north of downtown Los Angeles.
As I stand here, I stand here with a heavy heart. And today is truly a sad day and a tragic day for the Los Angeles County Fire Department.
First responders found a 44-year-old man with gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead at the scene, a sheriff said.
He was a brave, committed, loyal member of our department for over 20 years. And he was a 44-year-old male who died of his injuries.
A fire department captain, age 54, was also reportedly injured and taken to a local hospital. The gunman, who was an off-duty firefighter specialist, was found dead in a burning house 10 miles from the scene.
Following the shooting, we learned that the firefighter returned to his house. He barricaded himself. The home was set on fire, and he was also found deceased.
It's unknown if the suspect's wound was self-inflicted, and investigators said they're unsure of the actual motive at this time. A vigil was held in the nearby town of Acton for the firefighters who were shot.
A video shows a brave teen in California shoving a bear off her property after spotting it swatting at her dogs. NTD's Jason Blair has more.
A teen in the San Gabriel Valley is shown in a video pushing a bear off a ledge in order to save her dogs. 17-year-old Haley says that she didn't have time to think and just reacted when she saw the black bear leaning into her backyard. The video shows the bear swatting at one of their smaller dogs. Haley runs over and pushes it away as it falls back off a ledge. She then grabs one of the dogs and runs to safety. Later in the video, some cubs are spotted with the bear. It's likely that the bear was trying to protect her cubs. Fortunately, there were no major injuries and Haley got away with only a sprained finger and scraped knee. Looking back at the incident, Haley says she probably wouldn't have done the same thing. She says, "Don't do what I did. Don't get near bears. Don't push them off ledges because you might not be as lucky as me." Haley's mother says they usually see bears in the neighborhood a couple times a week, but this is the first time they had one on their property. Jason Blair, NTD News, California.
Coming up, the U.S. and China are both seeking nuclear deterrences against each other. China says state media says it wants so many nuclear weapons that the U.S. will shiver at the thought of war. And the UK reported 0 deaths from COVID-19 for the first time since the pandemic began. This means the country likely won't have to postpone its June 21st end date to restrictions. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News. China and the U.S. are both eyeing nuclear deterrence to target each other. As the suggestion of war hangs over the two nations, China could potentially produce 1,300 nuclear weapons by 2030, while the U.S. seeks to inject $22 billion in its own nuclear sector. NTD's Don Ma brings us more.
The possibility of a U.S. war seems to be lingering in Beijing's mind. Chinese state-run newspaper Global Times recently voiced that the regime must be prepared for an intense showdown between China and the U.S. The comments come on the heels of a speech delivered by the U.S.'s Indo-Pacific Policy Director and amid a backdrop of intensifying U.S.-China relations. Last Wednesday, Director Kurt Campbell said that the U.S. is done cooperating with China.
I think we believe that the best way to engage a more assertive China is to work with allies, partners, and friends. I think we all acknowledge that the period that was broadly described as engagement has come to an end. that
According to Global Times, as America's containment of Beijing intensifies, China will turn to nuclear deterrences. Shedding light on Beijing's goal, it said the number of China's nuclear warheads must reach the quantity that makes U.S. elites shiver. But the strong tone may not present an accurate picture. In reality, China's missile capabilities may fall short of the level it wants the world to believe it's reached. A recent report by Air University Research Institute reveals that while China's missile industry has seen improvements, they're mostly incremental. Advancements are measured next to China's previous progress, but not against competitors, making it likely that Beijing is actually falling behind. The report says that for the past 20 years, China only sees breakthroughs after getting its hands on foreign technology. It's largely because of the talent attraction and retention obstacles plaguing China's missile industry. The sector is stricken with problems like low pay and harsh work conditions for scientists. Even so, China still holds a large amount of nuclear weapons in its inventory. A paper from Princeton University predicts that China could be packing 1,300 nuclear weapons by 2030. But it hasn't gone unnoticed. The U.S. Air Force is seeking to counter China's nuclear power by investing $22 billion in its own nuclear capabilities. In its 2022 budget request, it reiterated that nuclear deterrence allows the U.S. to negotiate from a position of power. Don Ma, NTD News.
The number of migrants crossing the Channel to England has doubled compared to this time last year. Figures show almost 600 crossed in the past week.
More migrants are crossing the English Channel in small boats. A PA news agency analysis says more than 3,100 people had made the journey to the UK by the end of May. This is compared to around 1,600 at the same time last year. And almost 600 crossed over the bank holiday weekend. Since last April, there's been a sharp rise. In 2020, more than 8,400 migrants crossed the Channel from France to England, a record high. The National Crime Agency says criminal gangs have been seen using bigger boats to transport migrants to England away from the Dover Strait. It comes as Home Secretary Priti Patel sets out tougher rules against people smugglers. Under government plans, asylum seekers will be denied refugee status if they've passed through a safe country before reaching the UK.
The UK reported 0 deaths from COVID-19 for the first time since the pandemic began. The Prime Minister says he sees nothing in the data to alter the June 21st end date to restrictions.
I can see nothing in the data at the moment that means we can't go ahead with step 4 or the opening on June the 21st, but we've got to be so cautious.
On Monday, the UK recorded no new COVID-19 deaths for the first time since the pandemic began. This raises hopes that plans to lift the remaining restrictions later this month will go ahead. In the week to Monday, 32 deaths were reported, less than 5 a day. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says, despite this undoubtedly good news, we know we haven't beaten this virus yet. Professor of Medicine at Oxford University and member of the Government Vaccination Task Force, Sir John Bell, was optimistic about the lockdown easing plan. He told BBC Radio 4, "I'm pretty encouraged by what I see." Bell also warned against continuing lockdown restrictions every time a new variant emerges. According to the latest data on gov.uk, in the week up to May 25th, on average 124 people were hospitalised every day. On May the 25th, 133 were admitted to hospital compared with over 4,000 in January. On May the 27th, 870 patients were in hospital for COVID-19. 120 patients were on ventilation, while at the peak of the second wave in January, this number was over 4,000. Latest government data suggests more than 39 million people have received at least one dose of vaccine, nearly 3/4 of the UK adult population.
Coming up, a young ballerina is set to graduate from a top ballet academy. She's on her way to becoming one of the world's top dancers. And we check out an 82-foot transparent swimming pool in London. The pool is suspended between 2 apartment buildings and appears to float 100 feet above the ground. All that and more here on NTD News.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, this is important. You're now entitled to eliminate copays and get dental care, dentures, eyeglasses, prescription coverage, in-home aids, unlimited transportation, and home-delivered meals, all at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month.
I called to get dental, transportation, meals, and the Give Back benefit.
With this virus situation, I called to get everything I'm entitled to. I couldn't believe I was missing out on so many benefits.
With the uncertainty of the virus, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
A ballet prodigy is set to graduate from one of the world's most prestigious ballet schools, but her performance has only just begun. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Rachel Armstrong is on her way to becoming one of the world's top ballet dancers. She's set to graduate from Russia's renowned Bolshoi Ballet Academy this month. The 20-year-old is among just a few dancers from England to ever graduate from the prestigious institution. At age 17, Armstrong moved to Moscow from Northumberland in northern England to train at the academy.
I was with my mum and they had the ceremony on the first day where they hand over the point shoes to the younger students. And I remember saying goodbye to my mum, and it was I was very nervous and upset, but also excited.
At the time, Armstrong dashed across an empty dance studio, tiptoeing nimbly as she rehearsed. Armstrong returned to Britain last year as pandemic lockdown shuttered the country, but she continued to train with her classmates online using Zoom before returning to Moscow in September. Once she finishes her exams, she plans to visit her family back home. Then she'll go abroad for auditions.
I'm going to audition in different countries because I want to travel and experience different sort of styles of ballet. And once I have experience, I hope to return to Russia and dance in a really good theatre.
But for now, she's relishing in the fond memories from her time at the academy. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Londoners are seen soaking in the sunshine in an 82-foot transparent swimming pool. The pool is suspended between two apartment buildings and appears to float 100 feet above the ground. It's hailed as the first of its kind. According to media reports, it's the largest acrylic pool structure in the world. Residents of Embassy Gardens development can take in the city's iconic skyline views as they swim. It's located near the U.S. Embassy in Nine Elms. The pool is 10 feet deep and reportedly takes over 400 tons of water to fill. It was designed by architects, aquarium designers, and structural engineers. The pool was made in Colorado before its journey across the Atlantic to the British capital. And a new facility for retired circus tigers opened in Denmark. Now, among others, a 17-year-old tiger from Spain is exploring his new home.
This tiger from Spain named Kenny spent 10 years at a circus. He's moving into a new retirement facility in southeast Denmark. The facility opened on Tuesday and has an over 60,000 square foot park that will house retired circus tigers and other rescue tigers. In this park, the big cats can be out year-round. Among the features of the Tiger Park is an over 600-foot-long bridge at a height of around 15 feet, where visitors will be able to look at the tigers' lives up close. According to the safari park, tigers are solitary animals and move over large territories in the wild, where they only interact with other tigers to a limited extent. To reflect this behavior, the new facility will be divided into 4 separate areas so that some tigers can move around separately, while other tigers that have grown up together can walk in pairs.
Staff at the birthplace of Lego in central Denmark unveiled the world's largest Lego football. It comes as Copenhagen prepares to host group stage matches in the European Championships.
At the Lego house in central Denmark, everyone from cleaners, designers, kitchen staff, play agents and the CEO pitched in to make this giant football. They used more than 170,000 Lego bricks, taking 150 hours to complete the task.
It's really great that we've been able to utilize our time during lockdown where we haven't been able to have any guests. Then we had this amazing building activity where we can really turn something into this giant football, and I'm really excited to see it happen.
The football weighs 2.5 tons and is over 4 meters high. It is composed of 75 modules in black and white, which is the classic football design. Lego CEO Jesper Vilstrup said the football was two major passions combined into one.
Well, I think if you take two major passions like football on the one hand and Lego bricks on the other hand, and then you combine that, and then you build something like this where you have the world's biggest football made out of Lego bricks. It's just two amazing things coming together.
Visitors will be able to see the display in the Lego Square until the Euro 2020 final on July 11th and take a look at the ball for free.
A pair of rare dancing lemurs now lives at the Chester Zoo in England, making them the first of their kind to be cared for in a European zoo.
If this pair of dancing lemurs reminds you of the movie Madagascar, that's because the African nation is their home country. A video shared by Chester Zoo in the UK shows the duo moving sideways through an enclosure in a characteristic manner. A primate keeper at the zoo said that these lemurs move around with a fascinating sideways gallop while gracefully holding up their arms for balance when on the ground. It rather looks like they're doing an elegant dance. When in the trees, they jump from branch to branch with incredible precision. Named Beatrice and Elliot, the two 8-year-old lemurs who belong to an endangered species traveled from North Carolina to help establish a new conservation breeding program for the rare primates.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.